Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Bad Days, the podcast. My name is Rachel and I am your host, and I'm really excited to bring you another episode this week. I had a really good response to the first episode, and I can't wait to talk with you all about fashion and sustainability and all that, and it just gets me so excited. I hope you're doing amazing, and I hope that you guys are staying safe and healthy and are all getting vaccinated and all that. I just wanted to put a disclaimer before starting this episode. Sustainability is first and foremost a privilege, and each person is going to have a different circumstance depending on their income and where they live, etc. And I'm just here to share the knowledge that I know, and not everyone is going to be able to relate to my personal experiences. So I would never tell you to not purchase from somewhere because accessibility and privilege are definitely things that come into play. If sustainability is something that you are passionate about, then take what you can from my episodes and do whatever you need to do to take steps towards it. I'm just here to talk about it. If you have any questions, please DM me on Instagram at BadDaysALabel and we can have a discussion. So let's get to the episode. So if I do have an itch to shop recently, I'm always heading to Depop first just because none of our stores are open if you're in New South Wales like me. And so I'm always heading there even if it is to scour something that might be trendy at the time. So say I found something on TikTok that I really liked. It is maybe Y2K inspired or 90s inspired. I can definitely find that from a secondhand online store like Depop. And I still don't think that trends are great because of how influential they can be for the short time that they are popular, which leads to a lot of trends and a lot of fast fashion and overproduction. But trends aren't always a bad thing to follow. If you see something that is considered trendy at a thrift store that you resonate with and you feel like it works well with your personal style and you think that it's going to stay with you for longer than the trend survives, then I say go for it. But as long as you do it with proper thought and intention first, then it should be fine. I feel like the main point that I want to share within this podcast is to focus on valuing your pieces and your purchases more than anything, and think of them as purchases that are going to last you a lifetime, trendy or not trendy at the time. I personally always go to secondhand stores and websites first because if you think about it, trends are just reinventions of previous styles from previous decades coming back to life anyway. One big example to note is obviously, as I said before, Y2K. That's really big at the moment. And tell me you're not going to find some low-rise jeans at a secondhand store because I feel like they're all going to be at secondhand stores at this point. I refuse to go back to low-rise jeans. I do actually kind of like them. I'm starting to like them a bit more, but it's not for me. It's not going to suit my body shape at all. High-rise is for me. And I feel like there isn't even a need to buy new anymore just because of how much there is at secondhand stores. And I even say that as a small business owner who is selling you things that I made new. But like I said, I want your purchases to be about value over anything, whatever you think that means. So if you think that my pieces can be an extension of you and who you are, then that's going to make me incredibly happy. And then definitely buy my stuff. Definitely do it if that's why you're buying it. As long as you have good intentions, you think it's a valuable piece that you want to own in your closet, please buy. Definitely buy something from me. There's so many pros and cons of thrifting that I will be talking about in this episode. And there's just so much to talk about. I'm really excited. Lots of pros, lots of cons. Let's just get into it. So, thrifting is an amazing way to give items new life. There's almost like a thrill to like the hunt to find something that personally speaks to you. I always get super excited when I find something that I like because it is quite rare if I find something that I like. But it is such a creative, fun hobby, in my opinion, and you can definitely play it in so many ways. You can go in knowing exactly what you want. You know, you've got a whole Pinterest board ready, you want this particular piece that you saw online, and you go in with intention. Or, on the other hand, you could just go in and whatever speaks to you, you want to grab. And for me, that's always something with like a fun pattern or something bright that always intrigues me. And also because I do have sewing experience, it's really comforting to know that I can just alter a piece if needed. In saying that, I do have a giant box at home of pieces and garments that I bought from secondhand stores that I need to alter, but I haven't really done it yet, and that's something that I'm definitely going to tackle in this lockdown period. But like I said before, if there's a piece that you find in a thrift store that resonates with you, thrifting can really help you find and create your own personal style. And that's something that's incredibly important if you're someone who wants to express yourself through clothes and you're not finding it through a trend, you're finding it because you like it, like that's something that spoke to you. And you can find amazing unique pieces in thrift stores. And it also allows you to not be so consumed by current trends, because it's not like the store is welcoming you at the gate with whatever's new. It's up to you to see what you like. I think a second thing that is also pro about thrift stores is obviously the price component with thrifting. People donate clothes all the time, like all the time, for so many different reasons. Could be because it's not their style anymore, or it doesn't fit them anymore. Maybe it's a little worn down. But you can always find an amazing deal at a thrift store. And if you have a good eye, or if you're shopping in maybe a certain area, you might be able to find designer at a discounted amount if that is something that interests you. It's definitely all part of the hunt with that kind of stuff. And also, of course, can't forget to mention that secondhand clothing can also help so many people who have lower fixed incomes. And this is also something that you really need to think about first and foremost when thrifting as well, because thrifting was designed for them. Another thing that really excites me, if you're a history nerd like me, I really, really like being able to go back in time and looking at clothes that were made, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And of course, the ability to find something. Oh, you know what's scary? 20 years ago, that was the year 2000. When I'm thinking 20 years ago, I'm still thinking like the 80s. And I say that as a 22-year-old. That's insane. But anyway, as I was saying, finding something that was made 20, 30, 40 years ago, and having the ability to find something truly vintage is so exciting. And I feel like it's really hard at the beginning to find something like that when you don't really know what you're looking for. But I feel like over time, and when you do your research, you can become better at like looking at the tags and knowing brand names and all of that, knowing what era a garment is from. And having that ability definitely comes with a lot of time and a lot of knowledge. But if you did want to talk about it, let me know. I could probably talk about it on this podcast as well. That might be kind of exciting, just to like how to know if something is truly a vintage item. So let me know at Bad Days of Label if you actually want to know about that. Another pro is that you can increase the life cycle of clothing. I think that's the most important factor. If you're donating to a thrift and in exchange buying more clothes from that store, you're essentially eliminating waste. And you're disrupting the flow on consuming new goods in exchange for pre-loved vintage. That's probably better quality as well. But that also brings me into the cons. So if you listen to the last episode, you know that I'm incredibly concerned about the fast fashion industry, and the normalizing of buying new and cheap it's led to an increase in micro trends and therefore the production of more clothing, and it's happening at a rapid rate. And it's like we're getting tired of trends faster and faster than ever. And once a trend dies, like where does all our new Y2K 90s inspired clothing, inspired by the things that are already at the thrift store, where are they all going? So Australian Red Cross head of retail, Richard Wood, in an article for ABC, said that the rise of fast fashion has led to a rise in donations. He even says, and I quote, "Over the last 12 months, we've opened 12 new stores, and that is purely because we have the product that has been generously donated by Australians." And that might sound great that people are thinking of donating before throwing their clothes away, but let's actually think about this. The majority of fast fashion clothing, it's made of petroleum. And if you don't know what that is, petroleum fibers they're essentially like plastic. They are non-biodegradable. So if your clothing is made of polyester, acrylic, spandex, or nylon, for example, those are all petroleum-derived fabrics, which are incredibly harmful to the environment. And I'm sure you can just tell from like touching your clothing and the way that your pieces have lasted over time that fabrics such as polyester, they don't last very long. And it's crazy to think that more than 60% of fabrics are now synthetic blends, meaning that they are non-biodegradable and harder to recycle. So imagine living in a world where we create products, we create all these fabrics that are not only cheap, they don't last you very long, but once they're no longer wearable, we're not even able to recycle them or give them properly back to the earth. Because that's the reality that we're living in right now. We are currently creating so much waste, and that's insane. And I still can't believe no one's talking about this. It's actually baffling me how much waste that we have created in the last 20, 30, 40 years. And just in that short amount of time. And no one is talking about it. So before a garment makes itself into a thrift store for sale, it's sorted by somebody. And so if your garment has fallen apart and it's no longer wearable and therefore no longer sellable, that garment is immediately going to end up in a landfill. And it's not going to be able to be broken down because of the petroleum-based fibers. And also, if it does end up in the store as a wearable piece, having fast fashion garments in thrift stores can mean less supply of quality items as well. And that's going to be a massive issue for those who can't afford to shop anywhere else. And they're paying the only money that they have for items that aren't even going to last as long as they need it to. So Richard Wood has also spoken about this, and as the rise of donations increase, quality becomes harder to find. Only about 10 to 15% of those donated items get sold in stores, and then the rest get transferred to landfill, or they get exported to low-income countries. And those low-income countries who are producing clothes locally, these new clothes that are being brought into the country, they're obviously going to be cheaper. So clothes produced locally aren't going to be bought. So I'm going to read from this analysis I found online by Zara Zadro on the site Honey Sew It. I'm so sorry if I said that wrong, because they really pieced the information that I was searching for perfectly. So they said, in Australia alone, people are dumping 15 tons of clothing and fabric waste every 10 minutes. Australia is also buying an average of 27 kilograms of textile each year, including leather and homewares, and they discard 23 kilograms into landfill, despite the fact that they're mostly non-biodegradable. So the majority of it won't be resold or given to another home, and it'll just be thrown away. I find that so scary, to be completely honest with you. That sounds terrifying to me. Again, it's normal as well. It's normal for our society to do that, and it shouldn't be. And I feel like this ultimately comes back around to how we perceive clothing. And again, I spoke about this on the first episode, but I'm just coming to realize that it's way more important than I thought. Like, this is one of the things that I think that the previous generations have gotten right. They actually put value into their pieces. And they had to. They cared for the longevity of their clothing, and they cared about the quality of their materials, and they knew how to keep it forever. And because fast fashion is so prominent now in today's society, we don't really care for quality or anything like that. Value to us, I feel like as this generation, value to us is now finding a bargain. And cheap is valued more than quality. Like, think about that for a second. When was the last, especially before I started putting research into sustainability, I would always go for the cheapest price. Cheap was always much more valuable to me than quality. As long as I could get as many pieces as possible from the sites such as Boohoo and Shein, as soon as I could get as many pieces for a good amount, that was value to me. That's all I cared about. And I'm definitely not blaming this entire young generation on devaluing items, because that's not the case at all. Young people are actually the reason why thrifting is essentially trending again on social media platforms such as TikTok. And I feel like more and more people are actually wanting to buy secondhand as they are now becoming aware of the environmental impacts of buying new. And we can see that with TikTokers and YouTubers and other content creators. They're utilizing the popularity of thrifting, and they're upcycling their clothes, they're reselling their clothes. And in particular, they're also doing these thrift hauls, which I know if you watched the previous episode, you know how I feel about hauls at the moment, but that's how we're popularizing thrifting at the moment. So these content creators or these influencers are actually scouring thrift stores and online secondhand stores such as Depop, and then they're sharing this on social media. So at this point, you're probably thinking, Rachel, this is great. Younger generation is finally understanding that buying secondhand is greater than buying brand new. So how the hell are you going to ruin this for us now? And for that, I do say I'm sorry. I really am. I'm trying to cover all of the harsh realities within the fashion industry. And then from there, we will know how to do better. And so the thing about thrifting is that instead of it being a necessity, it's actually becoming more of a trend rather than a resource to people that actually need it the most. So let's talk about gentrification. I'm going to read directly from an article by Hazel Sills on the site Jezebel because I feel like they put it perfectly. So, thrift store gentrification describes the phenomenon of affluent shoppers who voluntarily buy merchandise from secondhand clothing stores such as Goodwill and the Salvation Army. When those same shoppers resell their merchandise on Depop or Poshmark at significantly higher prices, the price at thrift stores then rise to meet the demand, also popular TikTok videos claim. A store then becomes gentrified in the same way a neighborhood might, pushing out low-income buyers to make way for those with a surplus of cash. So to summarize the 2 points that I'm trying to make, thrift stores where a lot of low income earners would go out and buy secondhand discounted clothing that could be genuinely vintage and good quality, and now finding secondhand pieces that were probably made by a fast fashion manufacturer not even a year ago, and they're made with cheap, easily breakable, and non-biodegradable materials that are obviously bad quality. So it's not going to last them very long. And also B, they're not able to afford those pieces anymore, let alone true vintage, because thrift stores are creating competing prices to meet demand. This doesn't account for all stores at all, but some that were previously created to help those in poverty are now inaccessible to the people that value it and need it the most. So that's definitely a big issue that we need to consider when we're thrifting. And I think with lockdown, this has really become especially worrying, when the only place that we're able to shop is online, because if you're like me in New South Wales, everything's shut. And with that, I want to talk about depop sellers, online sellers, and that in relation to gentrification. So I don't think thrifting is wrong at all. I think anyone who thrifts clothing always has good intention. But the thing that we do need to talk about is the people that are profiting off secondhand merchandise in order to make a living. And I don't want this to sound negative at all, because as a small business owner myself, I completely understand reasons to mark up prices, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But it's just now with all these resellers making a living through Depop, it's becoming a lot harder for those who can't afford that markup to find vintage and secondhand pieces online, especially because online is where we need to buy everything at the moment. So even if Depop is still accessible to you and your own income, it's now becoming more inaccessible to some, to people who do actually need these clothes more. So let's look at Depop at a small business perspective. I'm going to just list out a bunch of expenses that I know for a fact that an owner of a Depop store will need to take into consideration. When a Depop seller lists their garment and you're looking at the price, you're not only looking at the price of the initial garment plus a little bit more. You're looking at the time it took to source the garment, the initial price of the garment. Obviously, there's also a 10%, I think it's 10% Depop fee. Then there's also shipping costs. There's also the factor if the seller upcycled the garment, how long it took to do that, and also factoring time to clean it and style the garment if that's what they did, and also the price of packaging. And that's real business. And if you're purchasing on Depop from a seller, you have to take into consideration that you're not only buying the garment, you're also paying for their services and their time. And if you're able to afford that, that's great. You're helping a sole trader who is probably just like a really young girl living their dream, and I do think that's amazing. The only downside to this is that it's only accessible to the more privileged. And then there's issues on top of that with what if the seller's claiming that an item is vintage but it isn't, or they're just not aware of it. There is an element of trust that you're going to have to give them as a buyer. In Jezebel's article that I mentioned before, they also stated that there will always be a buyer unwilling to wade through charity shops themselves who can fork over the cash for pre-curated secondhand clothing repositioned as fashionable vintage. And that's essentially what Depop is. And obviously I have to acknowledge my privilege as someone who has purchased from Depop before. Even as a broke-ass uni student paying bills, I can still sometimes afford to fork over cash for something really nice on Depop. And not many people can even think about that. So let's set a new scene. You're in the midst of a pandemic, you live in Australia, you cannot afford Depop anymore, and you don't want to purchase new because you want to be sustainable. Where the hell are you going to do that? It's a really hard question to answer, and I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to give you a definite answer. But I did do some research. And Depop isn't just a place for curated vintage. There's also still people on there just genuinely trying to sell their own personal items. And you're probably going to have to sift through a little bit of bull, you know? But there's also other stores such as eBay, Lifeline, and Etsy. I feel like those are the most well-known. There's also a company that I really like called Motonai, do hope I'm saying that right, who have an amazing philosophy and respect for clothing. So Motonai is a Japanese term that conveys a sense of regret concerning waste. And when you go on their website, the photographs are great, and they provide information such as the condition and the material that it was made of, if you are someone who is concerned with owning non-biodegradable fabrics, such as polyester, for example. Another company that I really love is Reluv, and that is spelled RELUV. They have a really good sustainability and social impact page. And they're also in partnership with an organization called Fabric of Society. So if you donate through Relove when you purchase something, Relove is going to match your contribution, and together they're going to invest your donation to help improve the health and well-being, education, economic empowerment, quality of life, and professional advancement of garment workers in developing countries, which is absolutely amazing. And lastly, another site that you could purchase from is Apparel, which is a Melbourne-based company who upcycles textiles, and their main goal is to end textile waste. So they recycle and they make things such as socks, which is something that you don't think about. It's kind of crazy because like when you're shopping sustainably, you don't even think about like your socks and your underwear, because where am I supposed to buy that? If you do want to know, I am actually going to do some more research on where you can buy those kinds of staples. Just let me know if you are interested at Bad Days the Label. Just DM me, because I do think that's kind of exciting. No one ever really talks about that. But with Apparel, you can donate your clothes for credit and you can purchase their recycled products. And that's insane. I love that. So yeah, it is really up to you to put in effort to find a piece that is right for you. I feel like the main takeaway for this is just to shop when you need. Just avoid overconsumption and keep your eye out for non-biodegradable textiles also. I can always expand on that if you need me to in further episodes, just let me know. And also just be aware of your privilege. If you're going to go thrifting, lean towards thrift stores that cater more to your economic status. And so that means you're not ultimately taking resources from those who need it. And remember that for some, thrifting is an actual necessity and it's not just a trend. So that's going to be all. Thank you so much for listening. Please let me know if you'd like me to cover anything else within the fashion industry with sustainability, or if you want to know more about my small business. If you think I missed out on anything, please send me a message. And if you have any questions or feedback, feel free to DM me at Bad Days the Label on Instagram. Don't forget to follow me on TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, and Instagram at Bad Days the Label for any updates and further information. And I also do sell crochet bags and accessories if you want to check them out also. And I will see you next time.